Today I have decided to talk about a new concept and a relatively unique area to take this channel. Essentially, I would like to analyze the certain spirituality of certain substances that we use in our day-to-day lives. This video is an attempt to analyze the spirituality of cannabis in a critical sense, let's say. In a sense where we can deconstruct it, see how spiritual it actually is capable of being, and how this could benefit or harm us depending on if this substance really is a spiritual substance to use. Or is cannabis just a mindless, brain-numbing substance? That's what I want to figure out today. And I invite you guys to join me on this journey. So what do I mean when I talk about spirituality? Because that can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. And in all honesty, there is no specific definition I can just throw spirituality into. Now, today I want to talk about what spirituality or spiritual means to me, or at least what it means to me in the interest of this video, just so people understand what I'm saying when I say is cannabis spiritual or not. Because I would say the most popular way to view spirituality would be in the sense of the mythical, the things from above, anything regarding spirits or our in tuneness with the universe per se, or things like this. So some people may interpret this as, how close can cannabis take us to the gods or to a different level, a different dimension? I'm not going to go down that direction specifically, but I'm not going to discredit that direction either or say it's wrong. But I'm not going to talk about that direction. How I'm going to interpret spirituality is mindfulness. How we connect to the greater world is what it means to me. How at peace does it make us? How in touch does it make us with ourselves and with the universe around us? How vulnerable does it make us? How does it make us feel about our reality? Basically, does this substance invite us to think about the world on a much deeper level than we might think about it while being sober per se? This is what spirituality means to me. It means the deeper level of human consciousness and what humans can think about their world and themselves. Can this elevate that? Can it improve it, or does it hurt it? Because that's also a possibility. That is what I mean by spirituality. But for somebody else that wants to take it to the next step of being on a whole different dimension per se, that's up to them, and I'm not going to tell them they're wrong. I'm going to focus on the way I see it, which is mindfulness, understanding yourself, understanding the world around you. That is what spiritual is to me. The spiritual mind is healthy. Your spiritual mind should be healthy and intact. And that is what we'll talk about. Does this drug improve the spiritual mind? Does it worsen it? Does it have no effect on it? This is what we should think about when taking a substance like this. And this is important because drugs that destroy our spirituality or make us numb or shut down or not in tune with deeper things are dangerous things. They're dangerous drugs. Drugs that can increase spirituality can be helpful as long as they're not addictive, incredibly addictive, or harmful to our bodies, of course. So this is what spiritual will mean to me, and this is how I'll treat it in the context approaching cannabis. So the question ultimately will be, is how spiritual is cannabis? So what is cannabis is, I think, the first question we should really ask ourselves. And I think most people that do happen to watch this video do not need me to go in depth into what cannabis is. Most people know what weed, marijuana, cannabis is. It's well known in our society. But I'll summarize it. I'm not going to go into the scientific details of what this plant is. This is research everyone can do on their own, and it is not critical to the nature of this video. But essentially, Cannabis is obviously a plant. It is typically smoked, but it can be consumed in many other ways. It is generally most well known for causing your mind to become all consumed in one thought, or essentially causing you to live in the truest moment. These thoughts can spin into negatives or positives, or they can focus on your favorite YouTube video even. So this is what cannabis is. This is something everybody already knows, but this is what we're working off. So let's continue. To determine how spiritual cannabis is, it is important we first look at the cons of cannabis. How do people use this drug to hurt our spirituality? Is that possible? And I would be the one to tell you it is. Many people do not use this drug responsibly and do not use this drug in a healthy or beneficial manner. Many people will become so-called stoners, which is not necessarily wrong. However, there is a type of stoner which will sit and do nothing the whole day and waste their life away. They will not think about greater concepts. They will not challenge themselves. They'll simply watch TV all day and be consumed in that moment. Like I said, cannabis has an insane ability to keep us stuck in a thought or keep us stuck in a moment, but this can work against us and it can work for us. If your thoughts are stuck on TV the whole time you're high, or they're stuck on eating food, or they're stuck on masturbating, then unfortunately you are using cannabis wrong, or at least not in a productive manner, which would be wrong in my eyes. You are using it to waste time, delay, or forget your problems. And this is not very spiritual to me, because you are not in touch with yourself and you are not in touch with the greater world. In fact, by using cannabis this way, you are forgetting yourself and you are forgetting the greater world. You are ignoring this and you are focusing on purely externals that are just pleasures, which are not something you should ever overindulge in. So, cannabis is abused quite a lot by many people. Partygoers, stoners, all kinds of people will take this drug and will not appreciate what it's truly capable of. Or they'll at least appreciate it in a different sense than I would, not in the spiritual sense. They'll use it to get faded while drinking, or they'll use it to excessively masturbate. These things will not benefit us. They will not grow us as people, because they are superficial pleasures. They will hurt us, in fact. They will keep us behind. In this sense, cannabis is very unspiritual. It's almost anti-spiritual, because it makes us forget about our own struggles and who we are in the greater world around us. So this is an area where cannabis is not spiritual at all. And it is very easy to fall down this side of cannabis. In fact, it is way easier to fall down this side than on the other side. So, abuse of cannabis should be avoided at all costs, and these factors show that. Essentially, one should use cannabis to get in contact with a more sensitive side of themselves, or vulnerable side. If they're using cannabis to get quote-unquote fucked up, then I would not call that spiritual in the slightest sense. And I would call cannabis harmful against greater spirituality if a person chooses to use the substance that way. And like I said, I believe many people use it this way, more than not, unfortunately. So this is what I would call a con of cannabis. It is very easy for people to fall into the pleasure trap that cannabis offers and completely forget about the magic cannabis has. Now, one thing that is remarkable about cannabis is it can both be a medicine and just a recreational drug. And these two features it has should not be understated or underappreciated. While cannabis can be abused and made to be a less spiritual substance, on the other side, it is worth noting that cannabis can also be an incredibly powerful spiritual substance. And this is something that I think a lot of people that have smoked for a long time forget, because they get so used to cannabis, they stop appreciating the magic it has. I'm sure you have heard the saying that when you first start a drug, the magic eventually fades away. This can be true with cannabis, and in a lot of ways I believe this is when spirituality fades away with the drug, when people get used to it and it's just a way to get stoned at the end of the night. However, the spirituality can be brought back, and there are ways we can make cannabis spiritual. And when we take action to make it spiritual, you'll be blown away by just how spiritual it can be. For example, when taking cannabis, one can meditate or journal to figure out about themselves, or think about themselves, what they want out of their life, or think about greater concepts about the universe or what the universe means to them. This is a way that cannabis can be very spiritual. Even listening to certain kinds of music is a great way to increase cannabis's spiritual effects. The beauty about that is when you start doing these actions and using this discipline to use it in a correct way, or in a better way at least, cannabis will reward you back by giving you enlightenments that you've never thought about. You may be meditating and you may start feeling very anxious about a certain topic, and that'll be your cue to help you realize you're actually very insecure in that topic. But because of cannabis, you would have not known that otherwise. This anxiety in a counterintuitive way is actually helpful, because while meditating, you discovered an insecurity in yourself that you may have not discovered when you're sober and your ego is very, very high. Cannabis reduces your ego and increases your vulnerability. This seems like a negative until you realize that what it's really doing is it's bringing out your insecurities for you to see and think about. But it can help in certain ways of being creative, story making, music, if you're actually trying. If you're not abusing it or getting immediately stoned, maybe you just want to get a little high, because that's where your creative potential is at its strongest, and that's where cannabis could be at its most spiritual. Well, somebody that gets way too high and stoned and essentially almost fried, that spirituality may be actually lost because now you're overindulging. So in order for cannabis to be spiritual, it has to be fine-tuned, and the user has to go into it with pure intentions to build upon themselves. Sometimes it's hard. People go into it with pure intentions and then they'll fall into the pleasure trap. It takes discipline to stay away from the pleasure trap. While pleasure isn't always necessarily bad, it should be minimized and sometimes even completely taken away from the equation when you're on cannabis. What should really be focused on when on cannabis is how you can improve your life, thinking about the world around you, or just trying to get creative by listening to music, or just thinking about certain concepts. This is how you increase cannabis's spirituality. And then at this point, you'd be shocked to find cannabis can be so incredibly spiritual that it's almost on a level close to psychedelics or intense meditation. And that is what I think is the most remarkable thing about cannabis, how it can both be a recreational throwaway drug that is just fun to get high on, and an actual helpful tool to help enlighten your mind. That is the magic of cannabis, but it is really up to the user what path they want to go down and when. So, when it comes to my closing thoughts on cannabis, I'm left admittedly confused. On one sense, I believe it is an incredibly spiritual drug that can bring us to massive enlightenment levels of the highest extent. But on the other hand, I see it's also a drug capable of being abused and used in a very simple way that indulges itself in pleasures. And I would also be quick to note that that is the way most people use it, and I am not pretending to be perfect. There are many times where I've fallen into this trap myself, because I am human just like everybody else. But I think it is very important going forward that we think about the spiritual aspects cannabis can offer us, and think about how we can engage them and potentiate them to a stronger degree, because it will only benefit us in the end. So when asked, how spiritual is cannabis, I would reply, it's up to you. Because at the end of the day, cannabis can be a dumb drug that you can get high on and just have a lot of fun and indulge in pleasure. And on the other hand, it can also be very spiritual and elevate you to new levels and help improve your life. But at the end of the day, the drug asks, which path do you want to take? And it's up to you to take that path. So, how spiritual is cannabis? Well, that depends on you. It depends on how you use it. Because cannabis can be one of the most spiritual tools you ever use, or it can have relatively no effects of spirituality at all and can even work against it. So my advice would be to use it wisely going forwards and to think a little more deeply when you're on the drug. I hope that you guys take this advice, and I'll take this advice as well, and try to keep these things in mind for my experiences going forwards. This is not only a way we should be using the drug, but it is a way to help improve the stigma around these kinds of things, so people don't see these substances as something just for the lazy or the brain dead. This is a way we can prove to people that this drug can also be a tool that is incredibly helpful for balancing a human being. And that is ultimately the truth behind all of this. Thank you for listening, and if anyone has any extra information they want to post, I'm all ears.